Welcome to Fundamentals for Startups, a CoMotion Labs production. My name is Caroline Hansen, Manager of Startup Hall, CoMotion's technology incubator, and I am your host today. CoMotion Labs is a multi-industry incubator hosting early-stage startups from both inside and outside the University of Washington. Our entrepreneurial community provides critical infrastructure and opportunities for learning, mentoring, and networking. As we are always looking to connect with new founders in life sciences, hardware, and tech plus, please reach out to me or one of the other lab managers sometime today. Fundamentals for Startups is an open lecture series on topics related to entrepreneurship. Every week, we bring a new expert in to share insights and answer questions. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to find all of our past Fundamentals for Startups presentations, and visit CoMotion's website to keep up with future events. Today, I'm excited to present Executive Coach Hien DeYoung. She works with CEOs and senior executives across the country to build leadership skills. She'll talk about the mindsets and behavioral patterns that can help or hinder entrepreneurial leadership. If you have questions for Hien, please wait for a microphone to be brought to you. We will rush one right over. Now, please join me and welcome Hien.
Thank you, Caroline. It's been a really long time, but around 6 years ago was the last time I was here. And I was a mentor here at CoMotion. And so I spent a lot of time in the startup ecosystem. And it feels really nice to be back. I can already feel all the creative energy and all the frenetic energy here. So welcome. I'm so glad you have decided to spend this time with me. I'm going to share some things with you today. And what I wanted to encourage you is please, at any time that you have a question, please don't hesitate to ask. And as Caroline said, just wait till the microphone gets to you so that both you present and those online can also hear your questions. So my name is Hien DeYoung. I'm a full-time executive coach. I work with companies from startup to Fortune 50. I coach across a lot of different industries. So this is representative of some of the industries that I work in. Very diverse. I have experience over healthcare, life sciences, luxury goods, manufacturing, biotech, medical device, and technology. And so I hope that this experience will help you today. So I saw this viral video, some of you have already seen it, this viral video of Michael Gura. And when I saw this video, and it was just several years ago, immediately I thought of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurism. So this is a 1-minute video, so watch it with me. So this is what entrepreneurism is. This is what each of you in this room is trying to do, right? You're trying to figure out, how do I express my differentiation and the product that I want to bring to market? How do I leverage that thing that I believe that I have that is so much better than what is currently out there? And or how do I bring this thing that I know is going to make an impact and I want to have a different world because of what I bring? Right? And this is the journey. Now, what we don't see in this is how many times he fell down, how much road rash he got, right? What did he have to go through to even get approval to shoot this video? We don't see any of that. We don't see the discipline. We don't see how many years he practiced this trick over and over and over again to get it like this. We don't see any of this. And that is also a part of the journey of entrepreneurism. This is from Steve Blank. This is, if you don't know who Steve Blank is, he's a serial entrepreneur that is now many years a professor for Stanford and one other university like it. But he talks about the search for the business model and the execution of the business model. And this is what creates a company, okay? Now, what I added to that is the idea. You have to have the idea. And that's why you all are here. You have an idea. And you have to actuate that idea with a proof of concept. Now, between the proof of concept to a scalable startup is the funding valley, right? That's where you're bootstrapping. That's where you're asking your parents to invest part of their retirement. This is where you've mortgaged your house. This is where you have a day job, right? This is where you're going out and pitching to angels and getting angel funding. And for some of you, you're actually at seed funding. But that's the funding valley. That's the place where it's the hardest. And then from there, you go to 1.1, and then you go to 2.0, right? And so where does leadership and constructive mindset comes in? It comes in underneath that. It starts actually right at the idea, but it really starts to show up in the funding valley. This is the leadership furnace. This is where you're going to come face to face with yourself every day, if not every moment. This is where your mindset and what you believe about yourself, other people, and the product that you're bringing, this is where it really starts to show up. And this is where you start making some choices about what you believe about your leadership that is going to either iterate and grow or keep you here at the funding valley and in the leadership furnace. There's this movie that came out last year that garnered a lot of awards, and it's called Everything Everywhere All at Once. Michelle Yeoh, probably pronouncing her last name wrong, who is a martial artist, is in this, and just this was the pinnacle of her career. She's in a midlife crisis. Her family's laundromat is failing. The IRS is starting to do an audit. Her husband is out of touch with her. She's out of touch with him. Her father doesn't agree with any of her decisions, and the relationship most important to her is her daughter, and she's trying to rescue that relationship. Of course, she makes it through, right? However, for leadership to build and scale a company, everything, everywhere, all at once isn't scalable. If you have that mindset of everything, everywhere, all at once, continuously, you won't be able to scale, right? And I'm not telling you this because I'm some sort of an academic expert. I'm not. I'm telling you this because I'm a CEO coach. I coach C-suites and executive and VPs. That's my sweet spot of coaching, and I've been doing this full time for 9 years. I haven't coached every CEO, but I will tell you, this is the most common pitfall. And it is the hardest mindset to shift from. So why would you even shift from that mindset? Because that mindset becomes a scalability blockage. I'll give you a couple examples, right? Is if you are everything, everywhere, all at once, it means this. It means that your company can only grow to the extent that you're able to do everything that's required as your business gets more complex. You become the bottleneck, okay? Staying deeply in the details results in not creating the relationships externally that will garner your funding. Staying in the details means that you lose sight of the strategy for your company. And then the third thing is that if you're everything, everywhere, all at once, you're the only one that has the blueprint. You're the only one that can make decisions. And if you're the only one making decisions, if you hire great talent, you've disempowered them. You lose their engagement. This is why everything, everywhere, all at once isn't scalable. So I don't want to spend a majority of my time with you focusing on that part. I want to spend my time with you focusing on the three really key areas. Fundamentally, that it doesn't matter whether I'm working with a CEO in healthcare, technology, climate, clean tech. It doesn't matter where they sit. These are the three things, three mindsets that enable scaling a company and growing as a CEO. So one of the CEOs I worked for way back, he spent 200 days out of the year traveling. He went to every conference related to the business of the company. He met with every investor that he could. He leveraged every connection that he had. And then at the end of the year, when he met with the board, right, the board gave him a 0 for his performance. And the question is, do you know the connections I made for the company? Do you know all of the ways that I have enlarged the company's, image in the marketplace and things like that? And they said, you're the CEO. We don't reward for effort. We reward for outcome. The outcome was to get a partnership and a licensing deal for the company, and that was not achieved. So, outcome instead of effort. When you look at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, are you putting in effort, or are you going after the outcome? And so you may ask me, well, what does that mean? Doesn't effort lead to outcome? Yes. And if you're spending time in the effort and you're thinking about the effort it takes, but not the outcome, right, then you're not going to move the company forward. So, for example, right, do you have written down goals? I ask this question, and it's a very fundamental question, but you might be surprised how many companies do not have written down goals. And if they do have written down goals, it hasn't been cascaded to each of the roles and the positions. Yeah, we have a goal. It's written right here. We're going to go out and get funding. Great. What outcomes do you need in order to go out and get funding? Do you know who's actually going to go knock on doors? Do you know who's going to follow up with the potential investors once you've gone out and canvassed? There is a real psychological, proven scientific fact that if you write down your goals, whatever you write down is what you're going to achieve. So if your goal isn't stretched, if it isn't attainable, if it isn't detailed enough, you won't achieve it. So if you don't have written goals, do you have written goals? Do you have a product roadmap? Right? Do you have, and your goals, are they prioritized? Right? Do you have 5 key goals that are cascaded down, or do you have 15 goals? Did you know that the human mind can only hold 5? Any number after 5, the mind doesn't prioritize. Did you know that? So as an executive coach, when I work with CEOs, I tell them your top 5 goals. That's all we're going to work on. Your top 5 goals. Because after that, the human mind doesn't prioritize. So keep that in mind as you create goals for your company. Time leaks. They're not what you think they are. Number 1 time leak, perfectionism. Perfectionism. Huge time leak. Failure and iteration is how you're going to improve your product, not perfectionism. Perfectionism in the way you behave isn't going to make you a better CEO. Failure is learning. Failure is learning. I wasn't born an executive coach. Right? I wasn't like all of a sudden successful and it took me 20 years. Failure and iteration. I still, today, as an executive coach, fail and iterate. I fail and I iterate. I fail and I iterate. That's really what growth looks like, not perfectionism. Perfectionism is actually a defense because there's something in us, in our experience, that says failure is ultimate, and it's not. I can't tell you how many CEOs failed in their companies before they became really great CEOs. The other time leak, my way. No, that's not what I was thinking of. It has to be like this. The difference between my way and perfectionism is that you have in your mind, it has to be a particular way. The meeting has to go a particular way. This product design has to go a certain way. The BD document has to go a certain way. You're not doing it, but you want people to do it your way. Do you know what that is? That is designing for one, and that's you. That's not designing for your customers. Diversity of approaches enables your product to reach many. But when it's designed with just your way, that's designed for one, not many. And I know some of you are sitting here and going, Hien, I really am the expert in what we're doing. I get that. But remember, everything all at once everywhere isn't scalable. So if you are the true expert on the product, then you need to develop the other people in your company so that they can be experts also. At least enough expert to carry out the parts so that your company can scale. The other time leak, indecision. Indecisiveness is a time leak, right? And there's lots of defenses that we have when we're indecisive. We ask for more information. I worked for a CEO who was a head of business development. And so I would know when he was in areas of indecisiveness. And you know how I would know? He would send me off to go do research. And then I'd bring it back, and then he'd be like, okay, now I want you to go and research that over there. That was his defense against indecisiveness, right? You each have a defense, a way of avoiding making decisions, right? But indecisiveness. So what do you do when that happens to you? What do you do when that creeps up on you? Here's what you do. You go to your values, and you think about the decision you need to make, and you connect that to your values, and let that guide you in making your decision. Leading by committee. All just, the decisions, you get people together to make the decisions, right? Or you poll everybody and then you make the decision, right? That's a time leak. Because the time it takes to do that is a time leak against with other priorities that you need to do. So what do you do in that case? Baby steps. It's a really important word for you to learn, or 2 words, baby step. Right? Take baby steps. Take little risks so that you can course correct, right? Calculated risk instead of over-optimism. So this is super important. So I have seen many times, and this happens a lot in funding, right? Where you're at a point and you're desperate for funding. Where you either have a company and you're realizing, I have got to get this funding through the door. It's not only about paying the clinical trials. It's not only about, retaining this engineering group, but it's meeting payroll. And then this is where the over-optimistic projections go to the board or to the investor, right? And it will always bite you. And the question is, to what degree? But here's what you need to understand is that you may be purposely understanding that you're being over-optimistic, right? And it's going to come back and bite you. But what you need to understand is there's 2 places where it becomes detrimental. The first place is that you become known for that in the funding and with your board and with your investors, that you are over-optimistic. And so they will discount what you tell them. And then the other area where this comes around and bites you is your own team. Because they know you'll be over-optimistic. So you know what they do? They're going to manage you by not giving you the full picture. They're not going to really tell you how great it is because they know you're going to be over-optimistic. Right? And so how do you take calculated risk? It goes back to baby steps. There is this myth. There's this book about, it's called How to Take Calculated Risks. It's written by the CEO of Xero, Xero. And she said that the way you take calculated risks is that you take little risks. She said it's a complete myth that there's this one big risk that you take and then there's this one big payout. It's a myth. It's a myth. And so you take calculated risks by taking small risks along the way that then, as Malcolm Gladwell will say, becomes a tipping point. And it aggregates. See, human change isn't finding that one button or that one thing that if you change, ta-da, I'm a different person now. That's not the way it works. Human change is incremental growth that then aggregates and becomes this huge shift. So I want you to remember that. Both for risks and for the leader that you're becoming, it's about incremental steps. It's about baby steps. All right, now I'm coming to the fourth and final one that is super important, and this is team. Now, I know some of you in here are probably a team of one, and some of you are maybe a handful, right? Some of you being a team is, some beautiful goal in the future. So whether you are a team, whether you are a solopreneur or whether you have a whole team, I want to tell you about this, because this ultimately will make or break you, your company, your success. This is it. Forget everything else if you want to, but don't forget this. So let me talk about this. This is called the 5 pillars of an effective team. This is Google. Google, being Google, wanted to know, how do we stamp out and make effective teams? How do we replicate effective teams? So they have an in-house organizational development university. They looked at white papers, created a theory, and went out and interviewed all these teams that were successful and not successful. And they came back, and their data didn't stick together. There was no coherence, there was no pattern, it just didn't stick together. So they literally went back to the drawing board, they went to academia and started reading white papers about teams. They found Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety. And so based on that, they created a new thesis. They went out and interviewed all the teams, well, not all the teams, but a majority of the successful teams in Google, and they came back with the data, and finally there was a pattern, there was a coherence to it. And this is what this is. It was a total of 5 years for them to do this research. And this is how you create an effective team. This is how you replicate an effective team. So, psychological safety. Team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable with each other. If I make a mistake on our team, it's not held against me. So in the startup world, this is preeminent. If you have team members and they need to feel safe to come to you and go, you know this thing that you want to do over here? It's sus. It's not going to happen. They have to have the psychological safety to be able to have those kind of conversations with you. Dependability. This is so important for scaling. Team members get things done on time and meet the high standards. Clarity and structure. Team members have clear roles, plans, and goals. Do you have that at your scale? Whether it's a team of 2 or a team of 500, do you have that? The last one is meaning. Work is personally important to team members. Sitting here and coding this website has meaning for me because it's a step to making the impact that we want to make as a company. And then in impact, right? They think their work matters and it creates change. Let's take this one layer more. Here's the key finding that is so controversial. What really matters less is who is on the team. What matters more is how the team works together. Let me say this again. What really matters less is who is on the team. What matters most is how the team works together. In biotech, in technology, in healthcare, in luxury goods, in you name it. There's this myth that you bring in the superstar and then everything takes care of itself. Superstars are high maintenance. And a lot of times, company caters to the superstar, right? And it skews everything. How the team works together. Psychological safety. So here's the deal. Of those 5 pillars, if you don't have psychological safety, the other 4 pillars are minimally effective. Psychological safety is the foundation, that if you don't have it, so what is it? It's their perception, your team member's perception of taking an interpersonal risk. They believe the team is safe for risk-taking in the face of being seen ignorant, incompetent, or disruptive. This right here, for a tech startup, a biotech startup, a medical device startup, it's all about credibility, right? And so being safe to be seen ignorant, incompetent, disruptive. Here's a secret. Every one of you in here who has started a company, you show up like this to somebody else. And you're still here and you're still taking the risk. Extend that to your team members. Incorporate this into your company DNA. Confident that no one on the team will embarrass or punish anyone else for admitting a mistake, asking a question, or offering a new idea. This is psychological safety. Dependability, pretty straightforward. Reliably complete quality work on time. Enough said, right? Structure and clarity. Their understanding of job expectations and the process of fulfilling those expectations. If you are leading the company or a group, make sure that expectations are understood. Make sure timelines are understood. Make sure the process of what they need to accomplish is understood. Make sure there's clarity. Make sure it's written on paper. Make sure that you check in on them. Not to see if they failed or screwed up, but to check in on them to make sure that you have provided the resources and the support for them to do this. And they understand the consequences of performance for team effectiveness, that they understand that what they do or they don't do as a part of the team affects the effectiveness of the team. So that they're not out in the corner over here, right, working on their own, right? And that you don't encourage that, right? Smith over there, he's a genius at coding, but he only does it good if he's like away from the team and in this corner. So we're going to make sure that he has that. No, not at all. Smith needs to be a part of the team. He needs to understand the team's interdependence with him, right? And then goals are set. They are specific, they are challenging, and they are attainable. And meaning, right? Finding a sense of purpose in either the work itself or the output, right? The meaning of work can be helping the team to succeed or personal reasons. And then impact. It's the subjective judgment of the team member that their work is making a difference, which contributes to the greater good, innovation, whatever it is, right? I kind of lied a little bit. This is actually the last one. So in 2015, I started being an executive coach, and that's when I actually started my relationship with CoMotion and being a mentor. And I haven't kept up on the stats. But at that point, it was noticeable the suicides from startup founders. Because it's tough to be a startup founder, right? Remember that video of that cyclist, right? Finding that differentiation, right? We don't see the practice. We don't see the road rashes. We don't see how many times he crashed, how many times he practiced that to get to where he was, right? That part, that's your self-care. How you take care of yourself impacts your mental health. And your mental health impacts how you show up with people, to your vendors, to your funders, to your investors, to your stakeholders, to your board, to your team members, to your ecosystem. And so self-care is not a luxury, because it impacts how you show up, what you think about, and the decisions that you make. So your self-care can be anything. Right? It doesn't have to be going to Aspen and skiing down the best slope wearing the best ski clothes. It can be anything. It is that thing that when you do it, your brain stops talking. Now, here's the other thing. Steve Blank wrote a little booklet called Epiphany. He says true epiphany only happens a couple times in our life. But he said we can force epiphany to happen. In other words, you're really working through a super difficult puzzle, right? And you're really trying to find a solution. So he says this is how you force epiphany in those instances. You cram your head with as much information until you're like, I can't retain one more thing of information. I can't retain one more sentence. And then you go play your favorite activity, whatever that is. Gardening, skiing, biking, walking, running, whatever it is, you just go play. And then what happens is your brain takes, during the play, your brain embraces itself, shakes hands with itself, and then you will have an epiphany. Steve Blank swears by it. And that is the other reason why self-care is so important. So let me end with this. I found that my life in startups, I found that this really personified how I felt. And I hope that it brings you some comfort. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he or she fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his or her place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. So I wish this for you as I close my talk. And this is the part that is super fun. Questions?
Hey, I was kind of wondering about how when you're saying lead by committee is a time sink, but you're also trying to empower your team to bring up questions, how do you consolidate those two things? And is that empowering your team to make those decisions without talking to you and having that committee-like style? And so, yeah.
Great question. I'm so glad you asked it. So decision by committee is when you know you have to make the decision, and it's in your role to make the decision. And so instead of making the decision, one of the things that you do constantly is that you create a committee, knowing that you're the one that's going to make the final decision. But you have, you avoid doing it on your own, and that you have to have other people, or you go and pull other people, and then you make the decision. So I'm glad you asked, because it's a great differentiation, right? Is empowering your team and doing that, that's not decision by committee. It's when the decision sits with you, but you don't make the decision. You form a committee and you listen to everybody, and maybe you give the false appearance that they're actually going to help you make the decision, where at the end, you're actually making the decision. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi. I wondered if you had any tips on how to, like, not just cultivate this in yourself, but cultivate it in other people that are on your team. So there may be, you're trying to inspire new leaders as you're trying to grow an organization. How do you, kind of make them aware of things like this, think about it from that standpoint of, oh, I'm not just like solving an immediate problem. I'm trying to like impact and maybe attract other people to, I don't have to solve this myself. I could recruit an additional person and, double my impact. Like, where do you start in introducing these ideas to other people on your team?
Great question. Use the apprenticeship model, right? Equal parts teaching and equal parts taking them along with you on the journey, right? And you have to decide, right, depending on their growth curve. But the more and more they exhibit that they're growing, the more and more that you have them ride along with you, and then they slowly start taking over, and then you start phasing out. But use the apprenticeship model. And then the other thing that you can also use is you can also use the coaching model. So Michael Bungay-Stanier wrote a book called The Coaching Habit. It's the only book that I'm aware of that's written for people leaders. Not for coaches like me, but for people leaders. And he has 7 questions in there, and they're great questions. And if you utilize those questions enough, then you'll start customizing it to you. But those questions will help the other person think and help them to stay independent. And secretly, it's a productivity tool, because it keeps the responsibility and accountability with the other person instead of you taking on that. And so those are the 2 things that I would suggest.
Thanks for your talk. It was very helpful. You shared a few traits of effective teams, and I was just wondering, sometimes it's hard. I know you said it's not who's on the team, but how you work together. But there have been several instances, and I guess in my career and careers of my friends, where we recruit team members, and it's hard to tell, like initially, like screening for things like dependability. So in the beginning, when we're talking to them, they seem great, and then when we transition over, it's like, no one's delivering on their work, or it ends up being us doing most of the work. Like, how do you know who's a right team, like appropriate team member?
Great question. So when it comes to recruiting, a lot of times we meet people and we fall in love with them. And then what we do is we actually bias ourselves to hire that person. And we don't actually stick to our list of criteria. And so what you do is make sure you have a realistic list of criteria, and then hire to that, and be aware of your own biases in hiring. And what I mean by that, right, is that if you believe that it's all about enthusiasm, or if you believe it's all about someone just grinding it out, what is your bias when it comes to recruiting? And be aware of that. And then invite people to interview that you wouldn't normally think about, right? Your advisors, for example, a board member, a stakeholder, right? Someone who sees the world completely different from you, right? And then the other thing to do is have a strategy. I want you to talk to this person about engineering. I want you to talk to this person about their team skills. I want you to talk to this person about X, Y, Z. Have a very, intentional approach. Because if you don't have that intentional approach, you're all asking pretty similar questions, and all you're doing is you're getting sort of slightly degree or 2-degree different perspective. So be really strategic about that, right? And think about the questions that you're asking. Are the questions you're asking really going to drill down to, to what you want to learn? The other thing too is use case studies. We are 2 weeks away from our production deadline. This is the issue. How would you solve it?
We had a question from our live stream. What thoughts can you share about knowing when to quit versus when to persevere?
Ooh. There's many different versions of quitting. So understand that. Are you quitting the business model? Right? Or are you going to shut down your company? Right? Are you shifting your mindset and realizing that you need to scrap this and go back to point A? There's a lot of types of quitting. And to determine whether or not you should quit or persevere, the question is, what exactly are you quitting? And why did you get into this in the first place, and has that shifted? Quitting can mean a lot of different things. I've seen CEOs quit, right? They didn't really quit. Their mission is still here. They just found how to do it a different way. And actually asking the question if I should quit is a great question. Do you know why? That's zero basis. You're going back to zero basis and starting from scratch. And that's the place also where you can get new ideas, where you can get a fresh perspective because you're willing to flush the perspective you've been working with and start completely over. That's quitting, and it's also regenerating.
I imagine it's hard for a single person to have all the characteristics of a great leader. So how many do you encounter that recognize what they're not great at and then hire people to supplement what they're missing out on?
Those are very seasoned CEOs that have had several iterations, 1, 2, maybe by their third or fourth iteration, they realize, I got to hire people literally that are smarter than me, right? Smarter than me, more capable than me, so that I can do this. The aspect of scaling, right? When I work with CEOs, it doesn't matter how large their company is, they're going through some process of learning how to scale. So I'm working with one now, and he's finally hired in his C-suite. So he has 2 C-suite leaders currently, and now he's just hired 2 more C-suite leaders. And these 2 leaders that he's hired them from where he is today, looking forward strategically. And these 2 C-suite leaders are more seasoned than the other 2 that he hired. And the reason is that he, in this last year, has gone through a process of letting go and delegating and implementing these things. Structure and clarity, ensuring dependability, ensuring psychological safety. So he has gone through the journey to know what he does with his team members and how he scales and how he brings in more competencies. When he realized that he had reached his max, then he was able to let go and hire people that were more competent than him.
You mentioned how teams work together being so important. Can you just get more specific about that? What does that actually give us an example of bad and good maybe, or how to change it, or improve it.
Do you have a specific thing in mind? Are you asking from a specific scenario, situation?
No, actually, I'm just thinking about improvement.
Okay. So his question is, right? Let's think about his question. How do we know that it's a good team? How do we know that it's a team that's not performing? So if you think about what I presented, if I go back, these are foundational, it's non-contextual. What I mean by that is this has to be in every team. It doesn't matter whether this is an HR team or whether this is the cafeteria team or whether this is the AI team. These are the components that have to be in a team. So the question is, well, how do we know it's a good team? It's contextual. What is the team's output? And remember the big bomb, how they work together. What is the team's output that contributes to the value of the company? And how are they working together to do that if you have all these pieces in place? If the team is good, it's judged by what is the contribution to the company, and hopefully that's a contribution back to the employees. And so what's a good team? What's their output to the strategy of the company, and how are they working together with these pieces in place?
So in one word, it's like outcome.
It's always outcome. It's always outcome. Right? Now, an outcome that companies don't count all the time is the level of unhappiness within a team. That is also an outcome that has to be paid attention to, because that will impact your retention and your engagement and people's willingness to invest their intellect into the product.
Okay, so my turn? Cool.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we could talk a bit more about perfectionism, especially when talking about perfectionism in leaders, right? I feel like a good leader of a team might be able to create psychological safety within the team, and yet how can they embrace failure as a leader without feeling like, oh, if I'm not perfect, my team will not see me as an example, right? I mean, you know, I often feel like I have perfectionist tendencies in my personal life. Obviously, that also translates to my working life. So what are ways for a leader to be less perfectionist in general, versus for the team member maybe?
Okay, great question. So let's do a teeny tiny exercise, okay? I want you to think about that one person that you've worked with or worked for that still resides in your mind. And if they called you up today and said, I need help, right? You have that person in your head yet? You identify that person? They helped you. They were focused on you. You admire them. Do you have that person in your head? Do you have that person in your head? Were they perfect? They were human, right? And they had an impact on you because you know they were human, you know they were fallible, and yet their investment in you and their belief in you was impactful. So perfectionism isn't impactful. It's actually really destructive. So here's a principle that I use with my leaders who are perfectionists. This is what I encourage them to focus on, okay, is this. If you can't extend grace to yourself when you fail, it's impossible for you to extend grace to people around you. Let me give you the analogy. When my son died, people brought soup. Why did people bring soup? Because it's warm, it's comforting, it's easy to eat. They couldn't be there every moment to hug me and keep me warm. So they gave me soup. I know that soup is warm and it's comforting. If I never received soup, how would I know the value of soup? In the same way, if you don't extend grace to yourself for your failures and your shortcomings and that really critical voice in your head, you're not going to know how to help other people and extend grace to them and embody grace to them so that they know it's okay to fail. Because failure is learning. You have your greatest learning in failure, not in perfectionism.
Thanks for this talk. This is great. My question is, I have a team with some very strong personalities, and I find it challenging sometimes to promote a culture of psychological safety while at the same time making room for strong arguments and dissent. So how do you balance that?
Great question. Psychological safety isn't soft. It's actually pretty tough. Psychological safety enables rigorous and robust debate, right? It's what are you doing to make the environment safe so that people can show up strongly, so that people can debate, so that you can have that rigor and still respect the person. That's the underlying, right? You can have a really robust discussion as long as there's always respect for the person, for the individual. To understand that what you're debating is the technology, is a concept, is an idea, is a theory, but you're not debating the person. So psychological safety isn't soft at all. Psychological safety done well enables those kinds of conversation, where people will risk speaking really what's on their mind, right? And so that's the thing. Strong personalities, right? They're strong because they don't believe they're being heard, right? And that they don't want to lose, they want to win. And they believe that where they're coming from is the correct way. So here's the deal, prove it. I'm going to give you a week to go prove it. If you can show me that what you're feeling so strongly about is going to bring fruition, do it. I'm going to give you a week. And then we're going to come back and look at your results. Right? If they believe in their idea that much, well, then prove it. Or, if you don't have the resource, the capability, and the bandwidth for them to prove it, go bring me white papers that show me in the literature your theory has probability.
Hi, I'm just following up on the perfectionism stuff which you discussed. And
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Sorry. I'm just following up on the perfectionism question, but more in focus of like individual member rather like a team or leadership guy. So if I'm think of like, I feel every object you touch have your fingerprint being attached to it, and similarly every job you do reflects your character in some form, like even 5 years later or something like that. But how would I avoid chasing perfectionism while I feel this way?
So here's the thing about perfectionism and startup, right? You're trying to avoid failure. Perfectionism is an avoidance of failure. And so in what you're doing, it's so high risk because you may have everything invested in what you're doing. You may be taking sacrifices in order to do what you're doing. And so the idea that after all this investment of your time and your resources and the expenditure of your relationships that you may fail leads to perfectionism. Perfectionism is actually, in all kindness, an insecurity. It's not a path to creating what you're trying to create. So the more that you hear the voice of insecurity that drives you to be perfect, the more you should pay attention to that, because that's not the voice of creativity. It's not the voice of growth. And it's not a voice of momentum moving forward. It's a voice of fear. I don't say that lightly, right? But in the CEOs and the executives that I work with, when there is perfectionism, and I've been working with them for a while, and we peel it back, it all comes down to an insecurity and to a fear. And for you, if that's dominant in the way that you operate, I encourage you to peel that back and to really look at that, because it will get in your way. It is the biggest time leak. You will spend so much time iterating and iterating and iterating that you never get your product out. So, perfectionism. I think there's time for one more question. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a question from the perspective of the University of Washington, like incubator. So we're always trying to like recruit new startups here, and we know there's a huge talent pool in all the big tech companies, like kind of mid-career people, mid-level people who are kind of like can't progress any further, you know, because the organizations get tighter at the top. And so we're always trying to like inspire people to like, hey, you should, you know, try to find further progress in your career by leaving the safety of where you're at and coming out and doing something. And so a lot of what you're talking about here is, you know, trying to make that decision, like reflecting and like, hey, can I go and stand on my own? Like if you're in conversations with people that are thinking about that and they're like, do I stay here and stay secure, but I don't feel like fulfilled, or take a risk? Like what would you be emphasizing in a conversation?
So I'll answer it this way. Harvard did a study several years ago, quite a few years ago, and wanted to know how many of their alumni had started companies. It was an extremely small percentage. Do you know why? Because they educated themselves out of the risk. Those people that went ahead and started the company, risk wasn't an issue for them. Their idea and their impact was more motivating than the risk. So in conversations with other, you know, with people who have experience working in companies and things like that, I would say this is that if they have that passion, right, all you need to do is ignite that passion. But if they're too risk oriented, right, they're not gonna take that risk. And there are personal situations that even if the person has that passion and wants to go out and wants to pursue their idea and their impact, they can't do it. And so in you having that conversation, really understand the person. Really understand what is their personal situation. Will they take the risk, right? And do they have a passion, a dream, an impact that is strong enough that's going to carry them through the entrepreneurial journey, that funding valley and that leadership furnace. Is that helpful? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much for spending the time with me. I so appreciate it. This was so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. And again, a big thank you to Hien. Next Friday at noon, we'll hear from Amish Patel. He runs a studio for companies working with hardware-enabled machine learning. Sign up today, and we'll see you next week. And food's ready.